All right. Welcome to another episode of LogiCast with the usual panelists. My name is BlankaKong. I'm joined by Mr. Esoteric, Gunnar Eos, Zeta Kaiser, and Huddle Wolf. Today's topic is an interesting one. We're going to be talking about censorship, specifically in JRPGs, or, Japanese media in general. So we can talk a little bit about anime or manga if anybody wants to bring those up. But we wanted to focus specifically on JRPGs for this episode. Just be warned that the episode might take a tangent here and there, but if you've listened to past episodes, you're already used to that sort of thing. So, I don't have much to say on this topic, so I won't be speaking for much longer. So, who wants to start off the conversation on censorship in JRPGs? Who wants to go?
I'll go. I'll start it off.
All right, Gunnar, go for it, man.
All right, so I guess I'll start off with the most obvious one, is the censorship of female characters and their assets, let's say, in the transition from the Western market, or the Eastern market, I should say, to the Western market. It seems to happen at random, and it's only been getting worse from my knowledge. Before, it used to be every now and then, or it used to not be the character's actual outward appearance. It used to be biographical information about the character. So there's like a discrepancy in age groups when it comes to Japan and specifically North America, where a certain character would look a certain way, but she'd be 16, and they would change that when it came to the US, and they would make her 18. So that way, if she's in a miniskirt, it's an 18-year-old in a miniskirt and not a 16-year-old. That really didn't bother me because it would usually be relegated to the character bio, and I might look at that once and never again. So it didn't really trigger me as hard. But nowadays, it's starting to be more physical features of the character, as in they'll change clothing from the original Japanese release to the North American. One example off the top of my head is one of the first times I started noticing, I should say, was when Bravely Default came out for the 3DS. There was a character or a class in that game, since it's based off of classes, called Vampire. And only the women, I believe, could be vampires or could be that class in Bravely Default. And I noticed that the Japanese release, their outfit was just belts, kind of like Lulu from Final Fantasy X. It was just belts. So the belts would cover their chest, the belts would cover their, lower regions, and it was just an outfit made of belts. I think it's a stupid design for an outfit to begin with, but that was their outfit. And then when they showed the outfit designs for the North American release, they still had the belts, but under it, they were it was black, and they tried to make it look like they were wearing like underwear or just like a black tank top and shorts under the outfit. So that was the first instance that I noticed of blatant outfit censorship between the Japanese and the Western releases. And I don't know, well, when we get around to you guys, I'm curious to how you guys feel about it. But when I first heard about it, it kind of made me upset because I'm usually not pro censorship. I'm usually against censorship. But I knew fucking comments were going, "Oh my god, fucking CCP motherfucker." But no, I was usually just release it. It's whatever. It's so, spoiler alert: women have breasts. Who would have thunk it? But yeah, but as I got older, I just realized, it's not that I don't care about it. I still do, because they've been really blatant and cheap about it. They do it in Xenoblade Chronicles. That's a big one. They tried to do it in Dragon's Crown, like a very niche side-scrolling action game, and I still don't like that.
My Amazon, I remember.
Right? Yeah. So I still don't like it, but before I used to boycott a game completely over it. As in, I'm not buying this game. This game is dead to me. it doesn't exist anymore. Nowadays, as I've gotten older, it's just like I understand it and I will admonish it and I will critique it and I will point it out. But if it's a good game and all I have to deal with is that her tits are covered up, I'm still gonna play the game because it could still be a fantastic game, and I don't want to potentially rob myself out of a great experience because they decided to make some changes. Again, I'll call it out and I will bring it up and criticize them for it every step of the way. But I used to go from complete banning, I don't want to see this game anymore, to I'll still get it if the experience is good, but I won't forget what they did to a particular character if they did something to him or her. So that's my stance on that particular part of censorship. We'll cover various forms of censorship in JRPGs and other media if when we get around to it. But I'm just curious how you guys feel about, do you guys boycott the game entirely, or do you say, hey, I recognize it, I'll call it out, but I'm still going to play the game? I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say.
Um,
all right, go ahead.
Oh.
um, I'm more in line with you, Gunnar. I will recognize it. It doesn't. Censorship has never boiled my blood per se, or it's never made me upset because of changes they've done, unless it was to specifically directly change the character as what the character was intended. But other than that, like if they cover the female's cleavage, or if they edited the gun hoister on the character's side because for whatever reason it was bad to show guns, then for me it would be more like that's an interesting detail, and it makes me want to go and look at the original source and research the original source, which adds to my interest to the particular game or anime that I'm watching or playing at the time.
Okay.
But at the same time, I don't feel like I should stop playing because, or even really complain about it. Like I love Pokemon as a franchise, as many people would already know. And there's a lot of censorship in Pokemon. There's a lot of censorship in both the anime and the video games, and it's still something that I find much enjoy of because the censorship isn't affecting the gameplay. And if it's an anime, censorship really shouldn't affect the story. I do, or I can imagine that it has before in certain animes, maybe. But for me, I've always been lucky. Like if the anime has something censored, it didn't affect the story overall. So I'm not for it. I'm not against it. I just think it's something that has to happen because much like what Esoteric said in our last podcast, certain things can be intended for an age group, but another age group can end up falling into it. So with censorship, you have to take that into consideration as well. You don't want to hear the backlash of whiny parents.
True.
I mean, you're gonna hear it anyways, but that's a different discussion.
Right. But that's how I feel about censorship.
I'm in the middle. It depends on what it is or what the game is on if I'll accept it or not. So, like I know how Wolf just said, like if it doesn't affect the story, he won't do it. And this was the example I was going to use anyways, which is for Breath of Fire 4. It doesn't like affect the story that much, but if you're invested in the story, you feel like the difference it makes. So the game is split between the obvious normal main character Ryu. I say obvious like people play Breath of Fire, but the main character Ryu, and then the secondary character is the other side of Ryu called Fangli or Fangli. I forgot how to say it. But it's a weird way of saying it, but he is like the emperor of the damn, I don't forgot what the hell the nation is called. Anyways, he's the former emperor. He's the first emperor of whatever their nation is, and he gets revived as a dragon, but their bodies are split. So Ryu is the other side of him who forgets all his memories, and Fang is the side that remembers everything, but he's just weak. And the Empire has changed, and he is no longer the ruler. There's new people now, and obviously they don't want him coming back, taking back his throne. So they send people after him, and one of the guys is kind of like a magey person, and he chases the Emperor down for most of the game. So, long story short, eventually he's actually able to hurt the Emperor, and he gets hurt, and the Emperor, mind you, does not like humans because he doesn't, as most villains do. They just don't like people. But he ends up into the small village of like one of his districts, and this woman helps basically nurse him back to health, and he starts changing because of that, because he actually starts caring about the woman. He cares about the people in the little small village. He helps them out, and the mage guy finds him again and makes a new weapon. And what the weapon is it uses people as an energy source. So as you can figure that, he uses the lady and her spirit to attack the emperor and almost kill him. And as he's like laying there thinking he's going to die, he finds like the charm that she had. Obviously now this enrages him, and he's like, all right, now I'm in revenge mode. Before I just wanted my kingdom back. Now I'm in revenge, and I'm going after the new emperor. And when he finally gets back to the palace, he doesn't just kill him like he kills everybody else. He decapitates him. He full
No.
on cuts his head off.
Wow.
But that is taken away in the American version. They completely censor that, and he just kills him like he kills everybody else. And like I said, it's not game changing, but it's like it's an emotional change, because like you don't get to see how upset that he actually is with what has happened.
Oh, okay.
And
So it like lessens the impact
it
of the
feels less
scene.
than when you know that in the normal version and the way that it's intended, he's that upset that he chops off the current emperor's head just to send a message, as opposed to what he does now, which is he just stabs him. And mind you, this is a
Oh.
PS1 game, so like showing a lot of emotion and graphical detail is not easy. So for beheading, like really stands out.
Interesting.
So for me, it depends on what it is. So like certain games that nobody else here plays, but a certain other person will play, but he's not allowed. Is they it can affect the gameplay, not by like a large margin, but it's like it'll be where like, oh, if you touch the screen, this will like have this kind of impact on the lady
Oh
characters,
yeah. Yeah,
and
yeah,
it'll
yeah.
affect their stats and stuff like that. So with them censoring it and just taking out that mechanic completely, they have effectively changed the game, and now they have to either ignore it because it's only slight boosts or stat changes, or they have to do it in another way. And it's like this has an age rating for a reason, so I don't see why we are censoring and changing this for a demographic of people who aren't supposed to be playing this in the first place.
Because they can't control if that demographic's gonna play or not.
Well, that's why I
Yeah.
said that's a discussion for
Mhm.
a
Well,
different time with people and their parents.
I have a question in regards to that. Because I
Yeah.
know usually with censorship, it's adjusted based on the region that the item is being sold, correct? Um,
Correct.
Sometimes it could just be because of the culture.
General
well, yeah,
answer,
yeah,
yeah.
but
I'm gonna say yes. Yeah.
usually the culture differs based upon like the region. For example, like Japan is more free than the US and so on and so forth. When it comes to certain things and vice versa.
Yeah.
Um, the reason why I say this is to ask this: could it be that because I don't know much about it, so maybe you guys might know. Could it be that some of this censorship occurs because the demographic threshold in terms of age is different, as to like who purchases the games and who can play them depending upon the region? Like for example, maybe Japan might have um everyone for everyone, but then when it's considered teens, they're thinking like maybe 11 or whatever, whereas the US is like no, they want it to be like 16 and up, or so on and so forth. So
I
that's pretty
think
much my
it's
question.
I think it's the mindset, to be honest, because
I would say that's possible, but
right,
that's what's the rating people. That's what their
mm,
job is supposed to
that's what
be.
their job is for. I think it's just the mindset, like the mindset has a role in it. So like in the West, I think it's because I think just recently and over the years, it's become more common to accept adults um to play video games and read manga, watch anime, be, in that kind of field or realm of nerdiness. Whereas in Japan, there's plenty of people who are established adults, established business people who's going to work and on the train. You'll see them reading their manga with the cute little anime girl instead of a newspaper per se.
Yeah.
So I think it's really the mindset that in the West, media like this is seen to be more geared to younger audiences versus say people like in our age group who could play. So when they take that into consideration, the censorship can end up being a little harder here in the West because they're gonna say, well, we put this media out there, chances are it's a 16-year-old who still needs parental guidance, who still is under parental rules, that's gonna play this game or watch this media. Do we really want or do we really care for that kind of backlash? And then you already know that the media has a tendency of putting video games and putting anime and putting manga in a very negative light because it's different, So um, I think all of that it's a variable to the many things on why you didn't get that powerful scene in Breath of Fire with the beheading of royalty, which I believe that's common amongst history.
Oh yeah, that's
And
what.
when you go right, and when you go to school, they do teach you that, that many monarchies who were forcefully dethroned were beheaded. I did not have to watch a history channel for that. I learned that in class with 29 other kids in my age group.
Yeah.
So I really don't see. I understand your frustration in that part because that is a powerful scene to tell the story of what that character was trying to convey. And it is normal for royalty to get beheaded if they were forcefully dethroned by rebels. So I get it, but at the same time, again, why I'm not against censorship or even for it, why it's just something that I realize I have to deal with, is because you have a lot of Karens out in the world, and unfortunately, Karens have kids. So those are things that you got to think they did
Not
that
buying
I
stuff for their
always
kids that they don't,
consider.
they shouldn't be playing.
Again, you buy something for the kid and you don't realize what it is until you walk by into their room and you're like, oh my gosh, what is this?
Just
Like,
that woman's chest is all over the place.
but yeah, like, so
Which
um, it goes back to also parents, some parents, not all parents, and sometimes even the best of parents isn't interested in their children's activities until they see something and assume the worst of it. So, that's another thing too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I
Yeah.
get that
You could
because
also
oh, go ahead, Gunna, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say it could also be from a gameplay aspect. It just won't translate well from one audience to another because a blatant example that's in my head is Fire Emblem Fates, the Fire Emblem that arguably saved the Fire Emblem
Yeah,
franchise.
yeah,
Um, in that game, it has a whole basically romance mechanic. You can, a man and a woman. You know what? There's two part. This is gonna be like a two-parter. There was one character in Fire Emblem Awaken Fates that she only liked girls. So if you picked the female main character, you could like be in a relationship, but you couldn't produce an heir because that's not how the world works. Sorry, but
how dare you?
if you were a male, she wouldn't talk to you at all. You can only proceed to like A rank. You couldn't get to S, where S is where you would ask for their hand in marriage. In the Japanese version, you could have that character drink a potion. I shit you not. She could drink a potion that when she drank it, she was suddenly attracted to men. And you can get to the S rank. Now, in North America, we call that conversion therapy. And that's highly controversial and tends to not work. So that character, when it came to the North American version, you couldn't romance her. There was no potion that suddenly made her attracted to men. You could only get her to A rank, which was like a trusted friend, and that was it. So that's like a cultural thing that just does not translate well. It just wouldn't translate well. And
That's
another
not gonna translate well. No,
yeah,
I can
it's
tell you
not. So they just like we're not going to even like try to tackle this. We're just taking it out. Sorry, you can't romance her. Learn Japanese and play the Japanese version. And another part, which is a gameplay aspect, which I could make a strong, or I could see a stronger case for people being upset that it was taken out, was the same game, the same romancing option. They had options where you could, since this was on the 3DS when it came out, the bottom screen, which was the touch screen, I think Zeta kind of was talking about this before with these type of game mechanics. You can technically tickle the female member of the army, and you can tickle her in certain spots, and that would earn affection points from her because it's just like you're being flirty with her. They took out that whole game mechanic from the North American release of Fates. They just took it out. It was gone. Now, you could say, well, I'm being robbed of a gameplay aspect, and you would be right, but they still added those same points you could earn from playing that little mini game. They added it at the end of the conversation. So they took out the entire mini game, but you still, from a gameplay aspect, you still reaped the rewards without having to play the mini game. So that is a gameplay aspect that was deliberately taken out of the North American release. You can't deny that. There's footage from the Japanese release, and there's a whole ass mini game that we don't play. So that is censorship that does take out gameplay aspects. But again, I can acknowledge it, criticize it, and recognize it's there. But even though I did lose it, this is really personal, and I think a lot of this is going to be personal. This whole podcast episode, I didn't care because I didn't want to spend time to like tickle this little mage because I'm trying to build my relationships up. So the fact that they took that out and gave me just the bonus points that I would have earned regardless, I was honestly fine with that. If I'm going to be 100% real, it was censorship and it was a gameplay feature that was removed. I can't deny that, but I got over it personally.
Yeah, I
I
think.
think it did good for the game.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I think to your point, Gunner, is that censorship is definitely a gray area, and it can affect gamers or people who absorb media, so to speak, in many different ways. Like for example, there are some instances where in Monster Hunter, in the Japanese version, you're able to kill the deers within there, but in the US version, for some reason, you can't kill them. You can knock them down, you can carve them, but then they get right back up.
And get up and walk away.
And they go, they go about their business. That kind of mechanic is like, okay, yeah, whatever. It is what it is. You're still getting the materials or whatnot. But to your point about Fates, you personally wouldn't have cared. I personally wouldn't have cared because it's like, okay, whatever. That tickle mechanic didn't make or break the game. But there are some players who would find that gratifying or, whatever. I have no idea why.
I mean, it is a game. It is a gameplay thing. It's a physical thing you do in the game that was removed. So I can't understand somebody saying, "Why did you take that out?" Going to like Zeta and Wolf's Point, like there's an age rating system for a reason. Abide by
Yeah.
the system. But it's just like it doesn't translate well. Western culture doesn't really go around tickling cute anime girls to get them to like you. So instead of trying to justify
Just
that,
haven't tried it yet.
You'd be surprised. You'd be
Hey,
surprised.
hey, I don't
Go
like,
to go to Comic-Con and find out.
hey. But it just doesn't translate. I don't think it translated well, and they could have just left it in. They 100% could have, but maybe some of the higher ups was like, nah, that's got to go. And it's either the game doesn't come out at all, or they take that out. And they're always going to choose to take out the small offender than postpone the entire release of the game or not release it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that because it's just with censorship it's a lot of cultural differences or like you'd have to have like a understanding like the countries would have to have an understanding between the two cultures or whatever or whoever you're producing the stuff for because just to give an example if I'm not mistaken and correct me if I'm wrong um India was very displeased with Dalsim and Street Fighter like we didn't get another India representation of a character until what's his name Rashid came about, if I'm not mistaken, or another like East
Well,
Middle East.
yeah,
Middle Eastern character.
Rashid was, I think, Saudi Arabian, so it's different
Yeah,
regions.
I believe he's Saudi Arabian. I believe he's Saudi Arabian too.
Okay, because I thought there was some type of no. I thought there was some discrepancy as to why they didn't like put anybody within that region.
Well, from my
after, like-
understanding, the Indian government did not like that representation of like somebody from their country.
I mean,
yeah,
not to cut in on Esoteric's point, but Street Fighter doesn't have very good representation.
no,
of
they don't. They
anybody.
they absolutely don't.
Let's be real. Fighting games in general are just huge stereotypes. Like,
Yeah.
like Terry Bogard, blonde hair, blue eye, American man. Like,
You mean same as Guile? Blonde
Are you
hair,
okay?
blue eye?
I mean, that's all American, which is what I was going to get to eventually. Is kind of my point. Is just like I don't understand. Like it doesn't affect me, but I don't understand the point of doing it because it's like we censor in one way because it's like we'll have those same stereotypes here. Like we'll always have the country redneck who's all about his beer, doing Charlene, freaking all this other crap. But
yeah, because as a country, when we do it to ourselves, it's okay. It's okay to a certain point.
But it's still the same thing. It's like
It is.
we,
No,
we
I
know
agree.
why the stereotype is there. Like
I agree.
somebody
It's
else
like-
doing it.
Here's again, I think it all goes back to the mindset, right? Like when Street Fighter came out, and you had Guile with the high cut top, flat
High
top,
cut top, American
and
flag on both sides
on
of his arms.
both sides
No
of his arms
eyebrows.
and whatever, right? So and he's very tall and stoic and brave and like for Americans, we gonna look at it in a more positive way because we aspire to be what a Guile is. We aspire to be strong. We aspire to be Guile is almost fucking perfect.
Well, I mean,
But-
we did before, but now
right?
look at us.
No.
Now being like Gao is seen as a bad thing. Now it's well, that's another thing.
Well,
But
hold on. Yeah, that's what the point I was getting to was like in other countries, they may look at it as a little bit differently. Where I don't think Capcom created or whoever created Dalsim for Street Fighter, I don't think they was looking at it like, oh, we're gonna make fun of the Middle East people by creating Dalsim. I honestly think he did them great justice because Dalsim to me is not only an original character, but he's also a very powerful character. If they took the time to really learn about who Dalsim is for the story, he's more than just a stereotype, right? So it's the mindset. It's like, well, you have video games out here that is portraying certain groups of people wearing bombs on their chests, running at you, exploding. You have video games that literally do that. You understand what I'm saying? Like, but Dalsim, if you know his lore, if you know his story, if even just watching him fight, it's an honest character. He's really spiritual. He's very good. He's about his morals. Like there's nothing really negative about Dalsim. but yet he is taken in a negative way. And that's because some people just don't like to be perceived or don't like other people telling them about themselves in a certain way. Maybe I'm not explaining it right, but I hope you guys get my point.
I definitely get your point. I think it's more so it could have been more of a aesthetical displeasement when it came to the character.
Why?
Because
Because
when
he's
you
a skinny guy with minor muscles and a bald head.
pretty
He's
much
wearing,
he's a skinny guy who's wearing skulls around his neck
yeah, he's got the
and
baby skulls.
he's able to stretch his limbs, you know, and then well no, they did this much later where in Street Fighter 5 they gave him the turban or whatever. But
I mean,
I
what I'm saying is
think
that they didn't change. They're not going to change Dawson. They didn't change Dawson. But they also didn't do the character any like in every Japanese fighting game, whether it's 2D or 3D, the American character is always blue. Well, not American, the white male character is always blonde hair, blue eyes.
yeah, that's true.
Always. Always.
You
Yeah,
have
like
And
if you're from
Cody
Mexico,
Alex.
yeah, you're Mexico, you're a luchador by default. There, you know the
right,
fighting
right.
style.
The only characters that get justification are the characters from the Japanese region themselves. Ryu gets justification. Kyo Kusanagi gets justification. They're all Japanese based. Kazuya, Jin. There's not. Is there anything wrong with Kazuya and Jin? Like there's nothing really wrong with those characters because obviously it's coming from that region's the person from that region's perspective.
Yeah,
But
and it's
it's how
hard
they
to
view the world.
yeah, it's hard to represent a character from another country and just make them into one character, especially someplace like the U.S. where it's like you look at any state in the United States and there's a million different people in it. It's like
It's a melting pot,
yeah, we want
pretty
a
much.
character
Yeah.
from the U.S. Football, cowboys, guns, go,
Or boxing.
or boxing. Like
Always
it's
boxing. And
like what's our national food? Hamburgers. Like
yes,
because it's hard, and I'm not gonna get upset where it's like they have people like Bob that he's a little robust, and it's just like, well, hey, I look down the street, I see Bob's, so like, like, yeah,
it's
can I
not
really get
wrong.
upset? And I have to let it go because if I'm get upset by that, I'm gonna get upset by everything, and then
Yeah.
just like you just gotta play the game, just
Yeah.
accept the stereotype. You can laugh at it, you can dislike it, but if you're playing like a fighting game and it's not a fantasy roster. It's like an international kind of based in reality roster. You just got to roll with the punches. You can't get upset.
Yeah, that makes
That's true.
perfect sense.
But that's where my annoyance comes with the censorship because it's always when it's on the outside. It's like, oh, this game coming in, we have to change all of these things.
That I
Or
agree
just
with. Yeah.
for these arbitrary reasons. Even though if we do it, it's fine. If it's in another form of media, it's fine. But it's always seems to be directly targeted towards video games. And
Yeah.
well, I guess because nobody else is really doing them, but from the Japanese development side of it, like
Yeah.
that is usually where my annoyance with it is always happening because it's always happening in one direction, and it's just like there's no reason for this. Like there really is no reason. Like even if it's not changing anything, it's an annoyance to me because like why are we doing this to begin with?
Yeah. And usually the censor jobs are really poorly done,
The-
or they're very obvious. Like one that springs to my head is because I was playing it very recently, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. What they did to the character Mithra.
Mhm.
So her normal default attire, I should say, is kind of like a dress-ish type thing, and she's showing her legs, so she has a lot of leg, and in her cleavage
blasphemy.
area, yeah, right. She has like a part around her breasts that it's like in the it's hard to describe. It's in the center, so you still see you see some side boob, and okay,
Oh.
fine, yeah. See, Wolf knows what I'm getting at, and
Yeah.
I know in the Torna DLC that came out, and then a stealth patch that they added, because I noticed this when I got to a certain point in the game when I got Mithra again. They cover her legs in like tights, black tights, and that little diamond that was around her chest, they just filled it in. And you can, if you see like scenes with her zoomed in, you can see the line where they just went to like their program and just took a piece of her outfit and moved it over and put it over the little diamond. You can see it because it wasn't naturally there to begin with. And then her tights don't look like tights because they just like they're her skin. It's her actual skin, but they just made it black to try to mimic tights. And it's just like you went above and beyond for something that no one was upset about. Or if they were upset about, they weren't buying your game to begin with to even get to the point where they saw this character. So like I get what you're saying, that it seems to be one way that this happens when it's
Yeah.
going to one part of the world, and you're not wrong. You're definitely not wrong.
And that was like, I know we was joking about it earlier with Kong and everything, when I was saying about what you just said about these people who aren't going to buy it anyways. That's like the other thing that also bothers me, is like it's done for people who are not going to buy the game. It is just the fact that they are not going to buy the game. They're not going to buy the game because you changed this thing. Because we have all these different TV shows that are made for these type of people that, all right, we've done these things. Here they are for you. And they don't do
They
well.
always fail.
They
Like,
all fail. None of them make money. None of them are successful. We do all of this stuff to make these people be quiet, and then they're like, all right, we got what we wanted. Bye. We're gone.
yeah, insert 20th failed next Netflix adaptation. Like, it's a meme at that point. It's a meme at this point where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, it's an anime, but it's on Netflix. It's gonna die in the first 5 episodes. Yeah, it's because it's created, or not created, but it's geared towards people who never cared about the media to begin with and weren't going to buy your product. And the people who were going to buy your product are the ones that get screwed.
Yeah. And they'll most likely still buy it, because like everybody here pretty much has been in agreement so far. We'll still end up buying it, but we'll just be annoyed by it. And
Yeah, I can't think of a game I boycotted outright because of censorship. There are things that I've been annoyed by, but I haven't. Maybe there has been. I just can't think of it. But there hasn't been a game.
I know I have, but I'm the same as you. I can't remember off the top of my head, because it was probably like a long time ago, and it's just I didn't remember.
Yeah, well,
Like things that I did boycott before were, they stopped this now, thank God, was when it was like when old RPGs used to have voices, and they was like, well, if you don't have an English cast, you can't bring the game over here. So they would just hire these just piss poor people to say lines basically, and just kill everything. Like Reed's game is funny, but that's it. That's where the line ends, and that was on PS1. Like that kept being the standard going up to PS2, and it stopped being funny after that point. It was no longer funny hearing Demon Fang in the most monotone way possible.
yeah, there was some.
Fang.
Yeah.
Demon Fang. That's
Yeah,
what it sounded like.
Like I hated it because it's like I'm not like, well, at that time I am a child, but I can read. Like I don't need to hear somebody with an English voice to say the lines that are appearing on the screen. Like this is extremely done, and that was a rule. It was like you have to have an English cast. That's like I said. Thankfully, that has gone away, so now they can just do what they should have did: translate the text, which is all I wanted.
Half the time they give you voice options, so you never have to hear the English cast. If you don't want to.
So that was when I was younger. That was my thing. That's like if I would boycott a game if they was like, nope, we have to have an English cast. Like I don't want it. I don't want it because all I want you to do is translate the text. And now you are either taking the game away from me, or you're just going to give me a shitty job and make me upset. So I'd rather not even give you my money.
I mean, now that I'm older and I make my money and I control what I buy, now there are certain games that I am not buying because of certain decisions that have been made for characters. The one that comes off the top of my head is the new Horizon Zero Dawn. Like, I'm not buying that game. I enjoyed the first one immensely. I'm not buying the second one simply because they decided to change, without getting too much into it, aspects of the main character. And it's just like, I don't support that. I don't know why you did that. There was no reason to do that. So I am just one fish in a giant ocean. So the only thing I can do is not give you my 65. So I'm not giving you
Why
my
they did
65.
it, but
Well, yeah, but
Is it more so for censorship or more so to fit a particular interest?
both
m-
have to be really honest. Well, I mean,
okay.
his reason might be
Yeah.
different, but I think it's both because, like we said earlier, it's always in the one direction, and it's always in the women direction of you look too good, so we're gonna make some changes so that you look less good.
Okay.
Well, I think it's a
'Cause-
difference between censorship, which is like
Out of nowhere.
Mithra, out of nowhere. Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Mithra
Randy
being,
Orton.
altered versus a character redesign
Right.
from one game to
right.
another. I feel like that we're kind of entering a different
Yeah,
room.
that's what I was asking. Is it more so a censorship or is it more so they're
Both
just trying
suck.
to fit something?
One
You
could
say that,
argue.
Both
Puff, I'll
suck,
let him
but I
go.
think they're two
Yeah.
different things. You know.
Yeah, one could argue it's censorship, but that's just me. But it goes from like, whatever. That game aside, yeah, I
Before
just
you pick
yeah
something
yeah
else, I was gonna say you can say that, but like there's no doubt in my mind that if they redo what you call it, the first game, they'll make her match the look of the second game.
So
Probably.
they would want to keep that consistency now.
Yeah, they will 100%
Yeah.
make it match the second game. So that would go back to being an argument of it being censorship because now you've changed the character for no reason again because that's not what it was like in the first game, and now you've changed it to match what's in the second and most likely assumed third game.
Well, what's funny about Horizon is, and there's a lot of things you guys said that I wanted to chime in, but I was like, I'm gonna let this conversation rock for a little while before I jump in. Before I say this Horizon piece, the Kelby or the deer in Monster Hunter were censored moving from Monster Hunter 3 onward. You were able to kill Kelby and you could see them disappear. In Monster Hunter Portable 2, Freedom Unite, Portable 1, Monster Hunter on PS2. It wasn't censored for the North American version. It was censored.
Did they ever elaborate on
3
that? Because I know
onward.
you're really big into like you're the Monster Hunter super fan.
Enthusiasts. Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
they
I didn't
ever
really-
elaborate?
I didn't look into it.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't have an answer. I can speculate, but I don't know for sure.
The deer fans out there. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. But onto to your point on Horizon, right? Like when Horizon was first coming out, the first one that is, a lot of people complain about Aloy's look then. Like she wasn't that attractive. Why does she have freckles? Why is she a redhead? That sort of thing. So there was an argument that they purposefully made her look normal or homely, I guess.
The word I use.
Yeah, homely I think is a fitting word.
Like homely.
For her overall design, because they wanted the focus of the game to be about the world and the robots and the relationships, blah blah blah. And it's funny how like that was their position, which is like in a way I wouldn't say it's censorship. I think it's just having like a very specific
It's the style at the time because
reasons-
she didn't exist anywhere else, so that was
right.
just
So
how
that
they
was
made
just
her.
what it was, right? And now it's like they made her even more unattractive. It's like, man, she was already not a 10, right? And they're gonna ugly her, like they're gonna make her eat, more calories just to like be a little more unattractive.
Found the last BK in a fucking
It's like,
abandoned room.
it's kind of weird, but
Yeah, and like
whatever.
I don't know. I just think it's a wrong way of thinking. Wrong think.
I think
It's just like
social credit score continues to go down.
it's like nobody was playing Horizon. Maybe somebody was, but I'd bet money. I'd stake my small amount of money that a large portion of the player base wasn't just standing there with her facing the screen and viciously looking at her. They were just like,
No,
I want to
probably
play
not.
I want to play the game. Half the time I saw her back. I only saw her face when
That-
cutscenes were going on.
That's what baffles me is that
Right.
what does the character appearance have to do with how the game is played? Like if the character is introduced to be, let's use you guys' words, homely, and the game functions as what the game is supposed to function as, you should be worried about glitches you find. You should be worried about things that's poor game design, not what the character, not the design of the character's beauty. Like to me, that's so. I'm not going to say shallow, but it's very immature.
I think it's
That's
very
my
shallow.
personal take on it. That's my personal take on it. You know, like, do I agree with them
I
to
get that.
make her uglier or not as attractive as, say, Chun-Li is from Street Fighter? But they don't need to go the route with her, but they could have just kept the same character model, designed it to work on the PS5, and kept it going. Because in the end of the day, you got your message across. You don't need to entertain it one way or the other. So it to me is just that's a very ridiculous scenario. It's ridiculous on the fans' part, and it's ridiculous on the developer's part.
Like it's extra to me. It's extra work to do something no one asked for. It's just extra work. You're making more, like, just produce a solid game, and people are gonna play it. Just have a solid character, a solid experience, and let that speak for itself. And okay, if she looks nice or he looks nice, because that's a whole other fucking topic. If he looks nice, I don't care, because I'm not playing it to stare at a fucking 3D character.
I agree. So like, I'm definitely a gameplay over graphics kind of player. The game can look like shit. If it plays fine and if it's fun or both, then it doesn't matter what it really looks like to me. I can get over bad graphics or bad textures or whatever. My issue is, well, okay, so some people do want their characters to look cool, right? And
That's
cool
fine.
can mean different
Yeah.
things to different people. Like, cool to some people can mean I want my character to match, and I want the gear to be like a certain color theme, or I want them to just look like a badass, whatever that means, a cape or whatever, right? Some people,
Yeah.
it's like they want to play a female character and they want to have something attractive to look at. So they want to make sure the character, is curvaceous or is, traditionally attractive to them. And some might see that as like, well, that's a little ridiculous. It doesn't add anything to the gameplay, which is true, but to them it adds to the overall experience. So I think it's important to, like, at least acknowledge that some people kind of think that way.
It's
I
a
can
part of the
acknowledge
immersion.
that, right? I can acknowledge that,
Right.
and I'm okay with acknowledging that because, like, even the game that we have yet to play as a group, Risk of Rain 2, I was doing some research on the characters, and the characters that I would play as, there aren't exactly my design type characters or characters that I see myself playing playing as in a design or aesthetic way. But then to me, it's just more like, well, they do fit my playstyle. So, oh, well, it goes over after a while. It's just like, okay, not after a while. It was like, oh,
Well, your
why do they
your
look like that?
priorities are in a certain position, right? Whereas
Yeah,
somebody else,
and
their priorities might be the
it's something
reverse.
else.
Yeah.
So again, it's like, well, if this game or media isn't offering me what I'm looking for, just shift my attention to a different media.
Yeah.
Like, you can easily play Bayonetta 1 and 2 if you haven't already. She strips when she does her magic spells. She'll show you plenty thigh, plenty back, plenty shoulder, plenty cleavage. And when
Yeah.
Bayonetta 3 comes out, I'm pretty sure it'll be no less. But this is coming from a player a gamer who idolizes, not even idolizes, how can I put it? More like admires characters like Samus Aran.
Yeah.
Right? You never know what Samus Aran looks like until the very end of any Metroid game you play. So I often forget that she's this curvaceous, sexy, blonde hair, blue-eyed woman in
American
all
Samus.
fully right in all
Space
blue.
American.
Space American Samus.
Colonizing the
blue,
freaking.
right? But you forget that. Like, I start to see myself. There are times when I'm playing various Metroid games, and I'm partially convinced that I'm a robot because of the suit that she's in for 100% of the game. Sorry, 98% of the game. And I never. While yes, Samus suits are attractive suits. What I mean by attractive, I mean the color scheme is nice, the build of the suit is nice. She got the arm cannon. If you like Mega Man, that's kind of a correlation you can make between the two of them.
very sleek design.
A very sleek design. It all makes the whole suit makes sense for her, and maybe this character from Horizon new design doesn't make sense for what she should be going through or the world that she's in. But at the same time, if I don't like the character's design, I'm just not gonna play the game. There's plenty of games out there that will give me all of that sexiness, even with the heavy level of censorship.
One that I wanted to bring up was Project Eve, which was shown off last year. Now, Project Eve is a hack and slash action adventure game similar to like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, right? Based on what I've seen and based on what they showed, right? The character is very voluptuous, we'll say, right? And she, very young looking woman, maybe 18, 19, 20 years old, right? If we had to put an age on her, right? People like the game looked fun, not because like, ooh, the girl's hot. Like, yeah, that was a thing, but it wasn't. That wasn't the genesis of why this game looked fun. It was the movement.
That wasn't the draw. That was just like
that was
feature.
a part of the draw, maybe for some, but for me personally, it was just like this game just looks fucking fun, and I like hack and slash games, and I'm into those types of games. So for me, it's like, okay, this is like right up my alley. But the game got a lot of flack because it's like the character's too sexy, and it's like,
oh my god,
well,
wow, you can't please people.
Did y'all not play Ninja Gaiden? Like, I mean,
Ryu kind of looking a little way, you know what I'm saying?
Did you not see Rachel?
Did you see those biceps?
I mean, all the main characters in Ninja Gaiden, or like the main good guys,
attractive,
they're fucking attractive. Even the guys, like fucking Ryu Hayabusa is like 6'2", fucking jacked, green eyes, luscious, brown hair. Like, get the fuck out of here. Yeah, you take the hood off. This guy is like a model, and this is like, that's okay.
that was
okay?
my point before. But like, it's always in just one direction. Like,
it's so
nobody cares
stupid.
about freaking what's that brute motherfucker? Not Turok, the other
Street
one.
Fighter?
No, we know who he's based on. Is it Conan? Like, it's Conan. Like, nobody cares about the Conan games. The man is literally walking around basically in a thong.
Freaking
right, and I don't see anything wrong with that. I'm okay with that. I actually like
I'm fine
aesthetic.
with it. I don't care, but it's just like, why is it always one way?
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe there's, who knows? I don't know why it exists, but listen, people like attractive things or people. People like attractive people.
How dare you speak science here? We're speaking about feelings.
That sells. It always has, and it always will. But censorship, I think, in certain areas kind of makes sense. Right. If you go back to like Pokemon cards or even Yu-Gi-Oh cards, like early in those days, like those cards were censored from Japanese to
all the Harpies ladies were censored.
Yeah, Harpies ladies or Gemini Elf or Misty's Tears or whatever it was called. Right. Those cards were censored because it's like, well, this is a product that's like very specifically targeting young children. So like I can understand why they don't want to sexualize female characters. I can kind of see that. You want to preserve a child's innocence, for as long as you can. I get that, but when it comes to like Mythra being, kind of like, isn't Xenoblade a T for T game? It's like, okay, well, this game is already for teenagers and up, right? And I don't care how much you censor shit, like you ain't censoring somebody's puberty. It's gonna happen. Same thing with Breath of Fire, right? With the decapitation that Zeta had mentioned earlier, like that takes away from like the impactfulness of the storytelling, which can, muddy the impact of the game and can make you feel like the game is a little, loses a few points in the quality, review section of your mind. Like it's like, if only, could have been a little better if it just had this, right? Same thing if you watch a movie and then you watch some deleted scenes, you go, oh man, they took all this stuff out. Thing that comes to mind is the Zack Snyder's cut of the Justice League movie, right? It was so much content. It was just like, whoa, right? We could have had this.
Was it like an extra 2 hours or an hour and a half?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. So I think censorship can. I'm like half.
It's a gray area.
It's definitely a gray area.
It's all dependent upon how it's used.
It's overdone.
Yeah. I go back to the cultural. Yeah, I go back to the cultural thing. If it's a cultural thing, sometimes it might just be better to remove a certain thing than to try to leave it in, and it's just like it'll cause more headaches than it'll save.
Yeah.
So a lot of like Japanese specific things that are fine in their country, but in our country would be like, maid cafes? We don't have maid cafes. So seeing high school girls in like maid outfits serving me coffee, that's a little weird, bro. But in their country, it's
Normal.
fine.
It's acceptable.
Yeah. So
We're an equal
like,
opportunity country. We have butler
We have
cafes.
Hooters. We have Hooters.
Oh well.
Well, to be yeah, and that's actually
We don't have the
gotcha
we don't,
game. A
we don't have the
gotcha game
equivalent for that
actually.
here.
yeah.
A gotcha game actually got some heat for that. Not really heat for that, but went through that recently. It was something gun cafe girls or something like that. Pretty much, it was well, coming from Japan, all the females are either really big breasted females or really flat chested females, but it fits the demographic of whatever they like over there. And the outfits were heavily um censored coming to being released globally. So what they did was the developers went back and have a uncensored version for the Android phone that a person can download and play that to get the original costume designs for the characters. And I just because it's a YouTuber I watch and he always covers gotcha games and stuff like that. So he was talking about it and it kind of like sparked me like, wow, they're even doing this to the mobile games. They're doing heavy censorship to mobile games. Genshin Impact just got censorship
Really?
update.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amber, Mona, Jean, and I forgot who the
One other
name was.
person, 4 females, their outfits were censored and they played it off as, hey, you guys are getting brand new costumes for these 4 special characters. That's how they played it off. But it
That's
was
one
an
way to turn a
update.
negative into a positive.
But it was an update of pretty much the same outfit being censored.
Yeah. And they did a real slick for that one too, because for everybody else, they had to have it. For us, it was an alternate, and then but everything would stay normal. But then for cutscenes, they're in the alternate or
They're in the alternate. They're forcefully in the alternate for major cutscenes. But during the gameplay, the actual game, I think it's an option to wear the costume. But
yeah.
they threw it at you as this is 4 free costumes for the characters as a special update. But it
Huh.
really was a censorship.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
yeah, even with this day and age of DLC, video games are getting censored not just on release day, but they're getting censored after being released. They're
Because
getting
that's just
censored
been out for a year.
a year after. Persona 5 was both Persona 5s was censored before they released, but Persona Royal caught a lot of flack because the new character they introduced, she wore like a swimsuit where it was like a ballerina kind of swimsuit thing. It's hard to explain, but she showed her legs. And in the American version, they covered her legs. And that caught a lot of flack as well.
Both her
But
legs?
over
Spoiler
And-
alert: women have legs, apparently.
yeah,
You heard the Stacy Keibler theme song?
She's got legs. That was a great song.
but at the same time, for me, it was just more like, well, I understand that censorship because coming to the US, these are teenagers. I believe the girl was an underclassman to the main characters. So that would net her to be 15, 16. So to be 15, 16 in the West, like what Gunnar was saying,
Culturally.
being sexualized or doing or being looked at in a sexual way is gonna seem weird to us. Because typically, unless you're of a certain mindset, you shouldn't be looking at a 16-year-old girl and saying, yeah, I want to see her legs. That you should, unless you're 16, 17, in very rare cases, 18 yourself. But that's where censorship, in my opinion, is kind of needed in that particular scenario. In Zeta's scenario, it's unfortunate that it kicked in. And that's a very specific scenario. That's a heavy toll.
I never forgot that. That pissed me
Yeah.
off so much when I found out.
You know,
Because
so
it's
I,
like I
I
felt that
understand
scene
what you're
when
saying. Yeah.
when the lady died. Like I felt that, and I was like, all right, we are gonna get our fucking revenge.
But yeah, um, and I understand that part. So, but I'm still leaning more so that censorship is still very much so needed in some aspects, especially
Yeah.
if we want these Eastern contents, it's something we have to live with.
The problem with
Because
that, and I don't necessarily disagree with you, and I'm sorry, Gunnar, I didn't mean to jump in front of you here, but I just want
No,
to say this one point, and then you guys can wrap it up, or can say your points. The problem with that, and I half agree with you. Like I brought up the Pokemon cards and some other
Mm.
stuff, right? That I agree with censorship. I kind of like okay, I can accept that. The problem is when it's forced. It feels like content is being policed for me, and it's like I'm a big boy. I can make if I want to consume this content, I can make
Mhm.
that decision, right? Don't make that decision for me. At least give me the option to, right?
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
certain things being censored, right? If you're trying to protect a younger audience, then that really falls on the parents, because I don't see
True.
censorship in movies, in music videos, in advertisements. There is no that same level of like censorship doesn't exist, right? And I
Nope.
think that's bullshit.
very
So
interesting. Yeah.
it's like, come on now, like you're gonna play
That's what I
this
was
song
saying
against
earlier. It's
here and
always
then
one
not
way.
other ways.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because they're gonna
it's
push.
there's a double standard.
They want to push the narrative that it's games that influence kids more than other medias. So it's
I don't
like,
think it's a narrative they're trying to push. I think, like I said in the past, I think it's because it's not of our culture. And because it's not of the Western culture, it's going to be looked at heavily, because your own culture, you're going to look at what you do as the
I don't
right
buy that
thing.
either.
well, yeah, and
I don't buy that
okay. So
either.
if
Go
you're
ahead.
referring to that, that's a particular like example. But what about other examples where things was made in house, like Mortal Kombat? Sega Genesis decided to leave blood in, whereas Super Nintendo decided to leave it out. Like they both still had the well, actually they didn't have
Well,
the ESRB rating at that time.
right, and
They're the
you have
reason
to
for
remember
it.
the companies. You have to remember the companies that
Yeah, who they
is
cater
in
to,
control
and
of these. No, not just what they cater to, but who's in control of these consoles. So remember, Sega Genesis came out with a very bold marketing system. It was a very, at the time of when Sega Genesis came out, the marketing system was very controversial. I even remember one ad specifically in a magazine when I did the research of Sega's history, where they had two pairs of metal balls, and they said, you need a pair of these to play one of these. And it was a picture of the Sega Genesis.
yeah,
So that is a very bold thing to do at that time. Nintendo is coming from being a toy company to being a video game console market. So Nintendo still has that mindset that these are children that's playing these things. Nintendo has always been big on, certain things. Not as of recently with the Switch. I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot of crazy stuff on the Switch that you can look up on video games. It's like, whoa, like Nintendo allowed this. But in the past, it was very, 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 very different for them. So the marketing was very different, So that's why you would want to play Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis and not necessarily on the Super Nintendo. Even though what a lot of people don't know is that Mortal Kombat on the Super Nintendo was technically superior to the Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis.
yeah, yeah.
But what pulled the Sega Genesis, or what held the Sega Genesis, was the gore impact. So censorship can even create that kind of um uh, uh
Reverse
in
market.
right, where one is doing better because of the lack of censorship, and the other is not doing so well because of censorship, even though one is technically superior than the other. So Kong said he disagreed with me, saying that it's our mindset where we are judging things that's not our culture harsher than what is our culture. What's your take
So
on
not
that?
exactly. So what I said was I didn't buy the whole culture excuse, because
Mm-hmm.
it's I can see that point, but they immediately go against it. So okay, we're gonna edit out this anime character's legs, right? I'm making a face like, really, but we're gonna allow music videos of Cardi B where she's shaking her ass and like gyrating like on screen. That's just like available
Do
to
not like
anybody.
the greatest thing ever of WAP.
Like that's come
Yeah,
on now. Like you can't have one and not the other. WAP, yeah, that's the music. I don't listen to modern music.
I don't. Right.
So that's where it's like
I don't disagree with
really
you
buy
on that sense. Right.
I don't buy
don't
it.
disagree with you on that sense. I just realized that talking to people who don't know about anime or who don't know about video games, that they tend to have a very they're more in, how can I put it, inclined to back up the Western belief or the Western ways instead of trying to be a little bit more open that people of other culture can have other points of views. I watched a documentary a couple years ago, so it's still it's still hazy to me, of why anime men in anime is drawn to be larger in terms of size or power versus women in anime tend to be drawn more voluptuous. And the way the artist explained it in the documentary, he said it's all about what Japanese people feel they lack in. So from what he explained, and I'm going to try to find the document because I hope I'm not lying on this guy, and it was many years ago, almost 10 years ago, he said Japanese men have a superiority complex where they feel
something like
inferiority complex where they feel that they're not adequate as men. So when they create this media, it is their imagination of what they would like to be as a man that's portrayed through the main character or the male characters of whatever media they're creating. And then at the same time, they also feel like their women lack in sexual appearance. So Japanese women tend to be slender. They tend to be, I guess, more sleek in physique. And they are drawn to be more sexualized with the big breasts and the wide hips and the thick thighs, because it's what is what they would want in a woman, or it's what their imagination would want in a woman. But then because it is anime or a video game you're creating, you take it to the next step and you exaggerate it, because that is a part of what the imagination is, exaggeration. I believe that's how he explained it. That's why in a lot of animes, you'll always see the male can grab, if such a scene happens, the male will grab the female, both her hands, with one of his. Realistically speaking, there's not a lot of men who can grab both a female's wrists crossed with one hand with a tight grip.
You would need a big fucking hand and a tight fucking grip.
Exactly.
Andre the Giant, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So that's where the exaggeration comes from for it. But again, that is those people's culture. So I understand it. So when I watch anime, or when I play a video game and the characters are big breasted and the men are tall and muscular, I understand this is what is a part of that culture that presented this media for me. So I look at it differently. We look at it differently.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Is that any different or that much different than American comic books?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I feel like
It's
that's the
not
same.
that-
That's
it's
just
kind of the same
universally
thing,
accepted
right?
that's what everybody is like.
Especially in Marvel comics. Like the
I've
women
had
are
that-
super voluptuous and the male characters are fucking jacked and like perfect and chiseled out of stone. Like that's not real. That's not real at all.
Even if
I've
they're
had
not,
that
it's even like you look like somebody
conversation.
like the Kingpin. Like the Kingpin is jacked, but he's still on the heavy set. Like he's more of like
Yeah.
a power lifter as opposed to being like sculpted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had that argument, and again, those are the same people that says, yeah, but Marvel isn't sexualizing the characters. Marvel,
Well,
if you look
blind.
at Storm, she's fully covered. And it's
Oh,
like
they're not
Storm
they're not
wears
doing it.
depending on what year
bodysuit.
Storm is fully covered, because Storm is
They're
not
not
always
doing it.
fully covered.
They're probably not doing it to the extent of the East, but they're definitely doing it to an extent. Like
They're doing it like Black Cat, Poison
a
Ivy,
Power Girl. Like
Power Girl.
Rogue was in a full bodysuit, but come on, you knew what she was working with.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like-
I can understand what you're saying, Wolf, about like the Japanese culture, and it does exist. It is real. I remember hearing something along those lines. I just can't put my finger on it. But when you look at least 90s and at least 90s and 80s, like comic book media and cartoons, like characters are still sexualized, and it goes to the fact, I think it's undeniable, that people are attracted to attractive people. Like that's just what it is.
Yes.
Period.
I
I
agree
don't care
with
where
that.
you're from. Like
Mhm.
you like
I
to
agree
look at
with that.
something pretty. Period.
Yeah, and
That's
I
it.
would say to piggyback off of Kong's point, like prior to having the internet, which allows you an abundance of information to look at and whatnot when it comes to certain items you want to purchase. Before the internet, I can speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure others did it as well. When we wanted something, we looked at it based off the aesthetic. Like if there was a game, the cover had to look like really interesting in order for me to purchase it.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? That was pretty much my choice when it came to like Pokemon. Like I liked the dragon as opposed to the turtle. So it was like, even though, he's not really a dragon, whatever. But that was one of my selling points to like why I wanted to pick up that particular game. But yeah, it's I think they all go hand in hand. When it comes to censorship, it's always going to be a gray area. It's always based upon the perspective of the people who are accepting the items versus the people who are distributing it. It's really hard to kind of set a parameter when it comes to that, and it really sucks.
I don't feel it's hard to set a parameter. I just feel like they should just set a standard. Like, look, this guy is too muscular. This is unrealistic. We're gonna have to tone this down.
But then
Like,
that takes away from the creativity of the person who's developing.
That's fine
it.
if it. Well, I mean, it's not fine, but it's fine. But I would be less annoyed by it if it was just a consistency across the board. If it wasn't just mostly targeted towards women and taking their attractiveness away, then I'd be like, all right, well, it's across the board. We want to make people plain and more normal looking, but it's never like that.
Well, yeah, that's a whole nother fight in itself. But what
That's
I would
true.
say
Ryu
is
has an alternate costume where he has his whole shirt off, muscle titties and everything is all out.
Like if they made, well, I mean, he'd still be in like amazing shape, but if they made Ryu less of a bulking man and more like Fei Long, who looks like Bruce Lee, so he'd be about the same size, then I'd be like, all right, well, whatever. This is the standard. We're all gonna look like this.
Or if like they can't just go ahead and change if they're gonna censor the female, they can't just go ahead and change her breast size. That just be, well, they've done it before, but that's still weird. But so what they do is they alter the costume. So even if it was, say, battle damaged Ryu from Street Fighter 4, where his costume, where he had his shirt off and you saw the scars on his body, they could have done battle damage Ryu where he still has on the full gi, but the shirt is ripped up. It doesn't necessarily have to say we're going to take away his muscles, because his muscles is what defines him as a character as well, helps define him as a character. But they can also don't need to put,
They don't need
if
to
it's
show off
really
his
that
fucking
necessary.
8-pack.
Right. They don't need to show off, that this man is freaking the epitome of the male body, the idea of the male body. It doesn't need to show that off. Then you have guys who accept their sexuality, or like, say, Vega. Vega is very he's flamboyant and he's flirtatious, right? But Vega accepts that sexuality part. Like that's how they designed his character.
Yeah, that's him as a whole.
That's him as a whole. That is his character. So if they're gonna censor the females, like, say, putting tights on Mithra, then they should censor, say, the other guy. What's his name?
Zeke. Yeah,
Right.
he had
They should have
trench
put a shirt
coat
on
with
him.
a Mm.
You know, put a shirt on him. Why should the females get off and the guys can't?
Yeah. Well,
it doesn't make sense.
That's what
no,
dogs, and we'll get off on anything.
yeah. Well, I completely understand all you guys' points. I would love to continue, but we're kind of like short on time.
Over
We went
time.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So this would conclude the censorship podcast. For those of you who are still, listening, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. It definitely was a very interesting topic on, from my end. I'm pretty sure for the rest of the panelists, it was interesting as well. Otherwise, we wouldn't be discussing it. Um,
We're
with
just here
that
for the
being
money.
said, for the money,
Yeah.
really, really, okay. Well, yes, we're gonna close out. Just to let you guys know, we post a podcast every week, every Wednesday at 12 p.m. So if you're looking to listen to that, feel free to do so. We we also have a 2 minute 2 cents video that we also have every Monday, um, as well. Just to let you know too, I stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday, primarily mainstream games such as like Tomb Raider, Pokemon Legends Arceus. You can catch me on Logical Gamers TV on Twitch. Also, BlankaKong streams every Sunday. He also he streams like mostly retro games for the most part. You can find him on Twitch as BlankaKong. And we also have a couple of socials that you guys can join us in. So we have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We also have a Discord and we have a TikTok as well. Just look for us at Logical Gamers TV. Just look for the light bulb icon and you're there. So once again, guys, thank you so much. This concludes our censorship video. And till next time.